Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike, and if this is your first time coming by my channel, thank you very much for stopping by. Subscribe down below if you like what you see in this video, so that you can see new videos and whatnot, and also leave comments down below because I really like having discussions with people about the topic of my channel, which is of course collecting swords and antique swords and modern made swords and reproduction swords, historical reproduction swords, and historical weapon related things. That's essentially the topic of this channel. So, and if you are returning to this channel, thank you for stopping by again. I got something really cool to show you guys today. So, in one of the last videos I did, I reviewed a sword by Universal Swords that was a replica of a British 1845 pattern infantry officer's saber. Now, I told you guys in that video that I own an original, and here is the original that I was talking about. So this one here is a very typical example of a British infantry officer's saber of the mid-19th century. I believe this one dates from around 1860 to probably about the late 1880s. I can't really pinpoint it for certain. It does have some things on it that I can research in order to figure that out, but I just haven't had the time to do that. And the maker is also uncertain, even though it does have a brass proved disc right here. It's very hard to read, so it's hard for me to pin down the maker, but it does have a retailer's name on the ricasso, and that retailer is Parker & Smith, Brighton. So yeah, that's the retailer that sold this sword off to the officer that purchased it. So yeah, this is probably one of my favorite swords of the mid-19th century, or even the 19th century just in general. I really love this design. I just think it's a beautiful sword. They are really nice swords, and they are very readily available on the antique sword market, which is, one of the reasons why I can afford them, because I'm definitely not wealthy. So yeah, this is a really cool typical example of this particular sword. Now, some of the characteristics of the blade is this is what is called a Wilkinson style blade, and the characteristics of that blade are a fuller that runs 3/4 of the blade, and then the last quarter of the blade is essentially a double-edged spear tip where you can sharpen the false edge. Yeah, so this is very typical and common on these particular swords, and it would have been a regulation pattern blade. So there's really nothing super unique about this particular model other than the fact that, it survives and it's really cool to own. But many British infantry officers' sabers looked and featured the same characteristics, just like this one here. Now, I got a new one in a recent acquisition. However, it is slightly different. Now, let me show you. Hold on one second. Let's put the sword down. So, here is a new one that I acquired. Now, I went to some of my favorite online dealers and antique websites to find this. I actually wasn't looking for this particular sword. I was looking to purchase a cavalry saber, a British cavalry saber or a French cavalry saber. I'm mainly interested in collecting British and French antique sabers, or some stuff from continental Europe. Like Austria or Germany or something like that, Switzerland. Even though I'm an American and I'm from the United States and live in the United States, I'm not too much interested in U.S. swords. I think it's because a lot of them are based on European designs, so I just don't find them particularly fascinating or unique, but that's just my opinion. I'm sure a lot of the U.S. collectors disagree with that. But anyway, I was searching through this one particular website and this dealer, searching through their catalog, and I noticed that they had something advertised as an 1845 pattern infantry officer's sword. And, I looked at it real quick and I said, oh, that's a nice sword. And then I continued to scroll through, and I couldn't find anything that really fit my budget or even my interest. So I went back to look at this particular sword, and here it is. Now, one thing I noticed about it right off the bat, I mean, it looks like an 1845 pattern infantry officer's saber. However, it's not. The blade is different. And that was the thing that caught my eye right off the bat. I noticed that, yes, it does have this central fuller, or this fuller running up 3/4 of the blade, but the last quarter of the blade is not that typical spear point that you find on the Wilkinson style blade. It has essentially what is called a pipe back design, which is a little bit of an older style of blade for these swords. The 1845 pattern had the Wilkinson blade, and the pipe back blade was abandoned earlier on as being not such an effective blade for combat, that it had some flaws. However, this sword had this very untypical hybrid blade, which looked like a Wilkinson blade, Wilkinson style, but then it had this weird last quarter of the blade looked different to me, and I thought that's strange. And then I looked at the ricasso to see if I could see the proved disc and who made this thing, and I realized, well, it doesn't have a proved disc. All it has is, let me see if I can show it to you guys, a number 13 with what looks to be like a crown stamped in there. It's kind of worn off, but you can kind of make it out in person. And I thought, I know what this is. This is a non-commissioned officer's sword of the British infantry, and mid-19th century. And I thought, this is fantastic. I never see these. You never see these in the United States market. At least I never find them. They may be more common in Britain, but they're definitely not common here. And so I bid on this thing, and I was able to get it, and I was super excited to get it. Now, when it arrived, obviously I picked it up and swung it around and did all my crazy stuff that I do. And I realized, even though that this looks a lot like the 1845 officer's pattern, which is right here, as you can see, very, very similar, right? Even the blades are roughly the same length. They don't feel the same. And hold on one second, put this down. And on closer inspection and handling, they don't look the same either. They have a lot of different features. So what's different about this sword? Well, first of all, the blade, which we looked at, it's a lot different. This is a much more serious fighting blade, in my personal opinion. It's not to say that officer's version is not a good weapon. It is. That sword handles fantastically, and I'm pointing down there because that's where it is. That sword handles fantastically and, is a well-made sword. However, this has a much more serious blade. It's wider. It's about 2 millimeters wider throughout the blade all the way up to the tip than that one, which means it's probably got a little bit better cutting capacity. And also, it has a thicker blade stock. The officer's version measured in way down at the base of the ricasso at about 7 millimeters. This one, if you go right down to the base, measures in at about 9 millimeters. So it's a thicker blade. It's a wider blade. It's heavier. And it's not to say that it's very heavy. I mean, I can swing this thing around pretty easily. It's very well balanced, just like the infantry's officer's version. However, it's a much more robust, heavier duty sword. And where that's even more apparent is in the guard. Now, this guard is larger than the infantry officer's guard. It's thicker. It's made of much thicker brass. And the grip is slightly longer, but it is just overall a bigger, beefier guard. And this is a really nice sword. And given the choice, if I were in the British Army and I were an infantry officer and I were ordering my sword, because for those of you guys who don't know, British officers purchased their commissions in the army, and then they had to go ahead and purchase all of their equipment. So their swords were private purchases. They owned them and they took care of them, and they got to choose certain features and options as long as it remained within the army's regulation. Sergeants and non-commissioned officers who would have used this, they didn't get to purchase their own. They were issued these. So this is essentially a government-owned, or was a government-owned weapon. And so as a result, these are simpler, and this has no decoration on the blade. It's just a very simple plain steel blade, and the guards themselves are simplified. Even though it does have the royal cipher, it's much less detailed, and it's not perforated all the way through. It's solid in many spots. So this is a very interesting sword. It's just I was shocked to see how much different it is than the infantry officer's version. And like I said, given the choice, I would take this into combat over the infantry officer's sword, because it's a much more serious fighting weapon I can't say it's a much more serious fighting weapon, but it's definitely beefier and more robust, while not sacrificing the excellent handling characteristics of the 1845 pattern British Army sword. So yeah, I was super excited, man, to find this. So question is, right, that really remains about this is, why would the non-commissioned officer's sword of the British infantry be a little bit more robust than, say, an officer's version? Now, I have two officers' versions. Two infantry officers' swords, 1845 pattern, and they both kind of feel like that one there. They don't feel like this at all. This is more robust than both of those. And from what I understand, the non-commissioned officers' version was always a little bit more robust. Now, because the infantry sword for officers was a private purchase, some of the ones that are out there, as I understand it, are more robust and have different blades and whatnot, because officers preferred different things. Maybe they wanted a beefier blade that was more in line with a serious fighting weapon. Not all officers' versions are like the one that I showed you. But if I were an officer, I would say, hey, build me a sword just like this one. This is what I would want to take with me if I were going to India or some other spot within the British Empire, Africa, somewhere where I was going to have to probably do some serious fighting. This is the one I would want to have, because this is a fantastic sword, guys. I just wanted to throw this video up because I found it really interesting that I was able to find one of these. This is just, I'm so happy to have it in my collection. It's a rare treat in the United States to find these swords, and especially one like this, because these aren't very common, as I understand it. So thanks for coming by, guys. Thanks for listening to me rant about my hobby. If you like what you saw today, like I said, just subscribe, and I have more videos coming. I'm going to be doing a review of a Dark Sword Armory medieval sword that I purchased. That is a really nice sword. I haven't gotten out to do any testing with it. I'm probably going to do some filming this week for it, and maybe by the end of the week I'll have it up. Probably not, though. Probably sometime next week, where I review the sword and everything, and it's going to be fun. Cut some stuff with it. But thank you guys for coming by, and once again, if you guys are interested in this kind of stuff and you want to comment down below, go ahead. I'll get back to you. I love talking to people about this kind of stuff. And if you see in the market one of these British infantry sergeant swords, and it's a good price, and you're a collector of this kind of stuff, grab it, because these are fantastic swords. All right, guys, thanks for coming by. Stay tuned for another video where I review that sword that I was talking about, and have a really good day. Bye.